Well, we were going to talk about the college football games happening on Saturday, but I just have to react to that Purdue Penn State game.
You are Locked On Northwestern, your daily podcast on the Northwestern Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. This is Locked On Northwestern, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Carter Bird, and thank you for making Locked On Northwestern your first listen every day. But as we get rolling here, the plan was initially to talk about this Duke game because that's Northwestern's upcoming opponent, and we still will. But first, I have to talk about this Purdue Penn State game because both of these teams are teams that Northwestern will see down the road. And, I come out of the game. I come out of the game feeling better about the Penn State trip because you're going into sixth year Sean Clifford and he still looks like the same Sean Clifford. Even that last drive, I don't think he threw a ball farther than 15 feet, and literally he just dinked and dunked it down the field, and I just don't think Purdue was ready for it, which is tough to say. But he has moments where he looks his moments where he looks good, and he has moments where he looks really, really bad. I mean, the drive before, the 72-yard pick six that he just airmails over everybody, should have been the nail in the coffin. Now, when you talk about this Purdue team that took the lead, it felt like Purdue shot themselves in the foot the whole game. I mean, the fumble by Sheffield that while going in for a score that set up Penn State to go down the other way and score before half and take a 21-10 lead. And then you dominate the second half for the most part. You're outscoring Penn State 21-7 in the second half, and then you get the ball twice with under 4 minutes left, and you are addicted to throwing the football, and you don't run it at all. And it's not even and some of the plays weren't even high percentage passing plays. They were just chucking it deep and hoping that it worked out. And you had Aiden O'Connell making play after play, and then you had these receivers and tight ends trying to make plays. You got bailed out by some penalties, but you ran the ball twice on those two drives, just twice, and you aren't eating up any clock. And then, well, here you go. Penn State has the ball with about 2 minutes left, and they march down the field with their two timeouts, and they go and score and win the football game, because then you have to march down the field in 58 seconds. I mean, it killed me for those Purdue players, because I don't think I've ever seen a coach call a game like Jeff Brom did for Purdue in that game. I mean, it was literally, it felt like he was playing NCAA football on the Xbox. I mean, and he was just throwing it every down, and everything should have told you to run the ball. Look, and I know both teams did not run the football well. Penn State carried it 32 times for 98 yards. Purdue carried it 23 times for 70 yards. I mean, and that's also counting Aiden O'Connell's sacks that he took in the game. But neither team was running the ball well. Neither team did a lot on the ground. All the damage was in the air. Credit to Charlie Jones. I believe I saw the stat that in his career at Buffalo and Iowa, the most amount of targets he had gotten in a game was 5. Most amount of catches was 3. And he goes out there in game 1 with Purdue, 19 targets, 12 catches, 153 yards, and a touchdown. Aiden O'Connell, in my mind, was the better of the two quarterbacks in this game. 29 of 58 for 356 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Sean Clifford was 20 of 37. And man, it was an uglier 20 of 37 than that. 282 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. The last drive, literally, he did not have to put the ball in the air longer than about 5 yards. It was, but I just I was sitting there. If you follow me on Twitter, you definitely saw it. It was, what on earth was Jeff Brom thinking? And I come out of this game from a Northwestern perspective, I feel better about the trip to Penn State because they look susceptible and really on the flip side, Purdue does have a passing game that is good. It is good. And Aiden O'Connell is a good quarterback. Charlie Jones is a good receiver. But I don't expect either of these teams to really be able to run the ball that much on Northwestern. The front that we saw in Dublin against a Nebraska team that is probably better built to run the football, I don't think that either of these teams can run on Northwestern. So I think it's going to be a one-dimensional pass game. And as we've talked about, the Northwestern DBs group is a very strong group. I mean, it's somebody that I expect to stack up pretty decently well with these two teams. And so because of that, I think I came out of this game feeling better about both of these games. I don't know. I'm starting to get this feeling that this season is setting up better and better for Northwestern as time passes. I mean, just the fact that they already can chalk up the one win in the Big Ten West, which Purdue doesn't have now. Penn State, obviously, on the other side, they're 1-0. I just think that things are starting to kind of set up for this Northwestern team to make a run again that nobody has predicted. Because I think they're good enough in the trenches. They're good on defense. They're good enough in the front seven. The linebackers look pretty stout in the first game. The offensive line looks awesome. I think they're good enough to make a push in the Big Ten West. Absolutely going to exceed 3.5 wins in my mind. 3.5 wins is not even in the question. I know that's the over-under for the season. I think by the end of the 4th game, that will be over that. And we'll obviously talk more about Duke here this next week. To talk about him here in just a second, because the week 2 opponent for Northwestern, Duke, they kick off their season tonight. So in just a second, we're going to take a look at that. But first, are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? What's the worst that could happen? You end up driving below the speed limit. It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. All right, so let's talk about this Duke game. They're playing Temple tonight. Duke is 9-point favorites in that game. Both teams in this game are coming off brutal finishes. Neither team had a win in their last 5. Duke's actually coming off an 8-game losing streak. So this Temple program that's been so good for so long finally has dipped, and they get to take on a Duke team that is was thoroughly not impressive last year. They did win that Northwestern game last year, but I mean, when you looked at it, it was really a tale of two halves. Northwestern dug themselves an enormous hole, let Duke rack up hundreds and hundreds of yards in that first half. So I think they may have had 400 yards in the first half. And then it was the second half where you saw Northwestern dominate. I think they only allowed 80-something yards in the second half and were able to come back and only lose the game by one score. I think that showed some fight. Had it gone Northwestern's way, well, maybe the season shapes up a little bit differently. I don't know. But last year, Duke was 3-9, ended the season on an 8-game losing streak. Now, the Duke defense last year was one of the worst defenses in the country. It was bad, and it was tough to watch. They allowed 518 yards per game, and it didn't matter how it happened. They gave up a ton of yards on the ground. They gave up a ton of yards in the air. I mean, they were giving up 206 yards on the ground each game, 311 yards in the air. That's not going to get it done. You can't be that bad. And it's something that led to David Cutcliffe no longer being the head coach. Now they have a new head coach, Mike Elko. But with that, they have plenty of other shakeups in that program. If you just look around, new quarterback, because your starting quarterback last season has transferred to Florida International. You lose a 1,200-yard rusher in Mateo Durant. Your new quarterback is Riley Leonard, who threw for about 300 yards last year. Nothing too crazy. You lose a 790-yard receiver in Jake Bobo, who's your leading receiver. And obviously, you have a new coach. You have so much transition. There's so much transition on the Duke side. There's not a lot of transition on the Northwestern side when you talk about that matchup next week. But I think what you'll see in this game is Duke may let a struggling program in Temple hang around that really has no business hanging around in the game. It'll be interesting to see if Duke has anybody step up, just because there's so many new faces. You're going to have a new quarterback, a new running back, and likely a new you're going to have a new leading receiver. You're coming off defense last year that was one of the worst I've ever seen. Gave up a bajillion points and a bajillion yards every game. Personally, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that they can turn it around and get off the mat of last season in year one, which may feel like a year zero for Tim Elko, just because there's a lot that has to be fixed with the program. So I like the way it's starting to trend for Northwestern, but it's going to be a game I'm going to have my eye on. I think Duke is favored by 9 points. I think the over-under is 51. I think you'll probably see a very low-scoring game, just because I think that there's, in these week 0 games, or week 1 games, rather, there's a good opportunity for offenses to kind of struggle. Although Duke's defense was pretty bad last year, so maybe they'll have to score in order to keep pace with Temple. But I think coming out of this game, you should see a team that you should feel confident that Northwestern can take on next week. That Northwestern can run the ball on, can block up with the offensive line and give Ryan Holinsky plenty of time to throw. You obviously get him at home next week. I think that's important. And I think that things set up well for Northwestern in this week 2 game against Duke. But I am definitely going to have my eye on this Duke Northwestern game tonight, see what it looks like. Or this Duke Temple game tonight to see what it looks like. So I have a better feel for what this Duke team is going to be when they come to Evanston in 8 days and take on Northwestern, who's already coming off a big win. So that's gonna be something I look for. And but coming up here in a second, we're gonna take a look at the other games in college football and how they some lines, make some picks, just because it's always fun in week one when you finally have a full slate of college football. First off, I want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, let's start in the Big Ten with Rutgers at Boston College. Game is at Boston College. Boston College is a 7-point favorite, over under of 48. Going to be a low-scoring game. I do think Boston College can be a sneaky-ish team in the ACC, and I'm probably going to lean them to win. I'm not sure if they win by a full 7, just because I think Rutgers and Greg Schiano can be a little interesting and can put up a fight. Tonight, sorry, I skipped over this one. You have Illinois at Indiana. Indiana is actually a 1.5-point favorite, over under 46, which is super low. Illinois obviously got their first game in last week in week 0, and Indiana's not played yet. I kind of believe in Brett Bielema and Illinois. I kind of think that he may not be able to build Illinois into a Big Ten West contender, but I think the type of ball he's trying to play, I think is capable of a little bit of success at Illinois. And I think the trend of his program is going in a different direction than Indiana. The Tom Allen experience at Indiana was fun at its peak. Man, it was so much fun in that 2020 season. Things have come crashing down. He's kind of taken the save your job, get bailed out by transfers mentality. I'm not sure that's a recipe that works in week 1. So give me the team that's already played a game, that already has a general idea of what they are. Give me Illinois plus 1.5 in that one. All right. Other ones to keep an eye on. I don't see a line for it, but North Dakota at Nebraska, because Nebraska is having to get off the mat after losing to Northwestern in Ireland. They had to fly back, deal with the jet lag this week, and as one of my favorite college football sayings from a podcast that I listened to, Split Zone Duo, they said, you should never schedule a team that ends in Dakota. So, because all those FCS teams are good right now, it's certainly interesting that they chose to schedule that game just a week after playing Northwestern in Dublin. I think had they beaten Northwestern, you're probably carrying momentum and you could probably power through. I just think that there's enough factors there that I'm not saying they're going to lose, but just keep one eye on it, on the bottom line, on when you're watching games, whatever it is, keep one eye on it. It'll be interesting. Finally, let's get to the big one, the top 5 matchup. I'm really not sure if you can really consider it a top 5 matchup. Notre Dame at Ohio State. Number 5 at number 2. Ohio State's a 17-point favorite. Over under is 59. Look, the difference here is Ohio State has a legitimate Heisman caliber quarterback, a legitimate Heisman candidate wide receiver, and a potential Heisman candidate running back. Notre Dame doesn't have that. And I think that's the story there. I think you see you see this Ohio State team run away with it. I think that Ohio State is one of the two most dangerous teams in the country between them and Alabama. And I think absolutely they smash Notre Dame in that game. Other big ones to take a look at. We're going to take a look at Oregon at Georgia. Another 17-point spread. Georgia is favored. It's not technically a home game for Georgia, but it's in Atlanta, so it's a de facto home game for Georgia. Over under 54. Georgia's defense lost a ton of pieces, but there's plenty of talent. It's just not proven yet. They have the best tight end room in the country. Brock Bowers, Eric Gilbert, Darnell Washington, the freshman in there now who's going to make an impact. I mean, they are super deep on that side of the ball. And I think that they have weapons, and Stetson Bennett's back. Take that however you will. I just think that, especially matched up against their familiar foe, in Bo Nix, I think Oregon can keep it within 17, but I don't see a scenario where Oregon pulls the upset against Georgia. But then again, last year, Oregon went into Ohio State. It's a very similar story. Same kind of deal played out, but Oregon ended up pulling the upset. So Cincinnati at Arkansas. Arkansas is a 6.5-point favorite in this game, over under 53. I think this one could get a little high scoring. I think, but at the end of the day, Desmond Ridder is no longer at Cincinnati. You lose a ton of people at Cincinnati. I think Luke Fickell's the better coach in this game, but you've got so many unproven pieces in Cincy. Arkansas returns a decent amount. They lose Traylon Burks, but they bring in plenty of talent at receiver. Give me KJ Jefferson and Sam Pittman in this one. I think they cover the 6.5, and I think they go over in this game as well. As you keep scrolling down the list of games, here's a great one, and it's Utah at Florida. Utah is a 3-point favorite. Florida's coming off a 6-7 season. Utah is coming off a Pac-12 championship, over under 51.5. And I firmly believe this. If you put generic jerseys on these two teams and you said pick the SEC team, I think you would pick wrong almost 100 times out of 100. Utah's going to come in there and physically exert its will on Florida and run the football, and it's going to feel suffocating because Florida's defense the last couple of years has not been tough. Especially last year, they were not a tough team. If you listen to Billy Napier talk in the media all offseason, he talks so much about how it's going to take time. It's going to take time. We're going to build it from the foundation. It's going to take a look at temper your expectations because we're going to have to build this thing. Well, there may not be a worse opening game to schedule if you're trying to build something from the ground up, and I don't think their defense is tough. Well, you welcome number 7 Utah, who's going to come in and do to you what they did to Oregon twice last year when they outscored them 76-17 in the regular season, and then the Pac-12 championship game. I think Utah exerts its will and just dominates that game. Elsewhere, you have LSU versus Florida State, I believe, on Sunday. LSU's 3-point favorite, over under 50.5. I don't think there's a game where we know less about two teams. You got Brian Kelly at LSU in year one. You got a new quarterback. Heck, it's a team that played a bowl game last year with just 38 scholarship players. Florida State, feels like they've got to start having some positive momentum. This game could be a blowout for either side, or it could be razor close. I don't have a feel. If you're gonna force me to make a pick, I'm gonna go LSU -3, just because the talent might be a little better. Over under 50.5. truly don't have a feeling that I might take the under there. Could be totally wrong. And then I guess other games to keep an eye on. Houston versus UTSA. Houston's only a 4-point favorite. It's at UTSA. Keep in mind, UTSA is coming off an 11-win year last year. They were awesome. They keep Jeff Traylor. You can make an argument that he's the best or second best coach in the state of Texas, depending on where you put Dave Aranda. That's one to keep an eye on for sure. And then elsewhere, when you look around, I think the Kentucky has a spunky MAC team to play in Miami of Ohio. BYU's on the road at South Florida. What can South Florida do in that game? BYU has one of the weirdest schedules. If you want to go look at something and just be like, who chose this? Ole Miss, new quarterback, replacing a lot of stuff on the offense. Jeff Lebby has left for Oklahoma. They are 21.5-point favorites over Troy. That's one to keep an eye on. And yeah, I can't wait for a full slate. I'm going to be watching all of these games. I'm gonna be glued to TVs all Saturday. Today I'll probably be calling high school football, so I'll have to go back and see what happens in the games tonight. But we will see, and we will be back Monday to react to it all and start to talk about this Duke Northwestern matchup. But thank you for making Locked On Northwestern your first listen for anything and everything Northwestern. I'm your host, Carter Bird. You can follow me on Instagram at CarterBird13 and on Twitter at CarterBird13 as well. It's going to be fun. Football is back. Last night, we got two unbelievable games in Penn State-Purdue. That one broke my brain, really did. And you got Pitt, West Virginia. And if that's a preview for the weekend to come, it's going to be a whole lot of fun. And I can't wait for it. But thanks again for making Locked On Northwestern your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, go check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022, an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season. Local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, plus a betting angle from Lee Sterling of Locked On Bets, all combining into one ultimate NFL preview. Search for Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. I think that's going to do it for today, and we will see you on Monday.